is the revolution in Egypt and its impact upon surrounding Arab nations. Dr. Madu, let's pick up where we left off last time and to give you an opportunity to continue talking about the impact that this revolution has already had upon Arab states. Go on and give us that information.
Like I said, the Kingdom of Morocco, also faces a lot of challenges. Like I said, in the mid-70s, the king at that time, Hassan, was nearly overthrown twice. The first time in 71, having his birthday at his seaside palace, soldiers burst in there to assassinate him. Over 100 were killed. He miraculously escaped. Then in 1972, his Minister of Defense, General Mohammed Ufker, organized a coup and then nearly shot his plane out of the sky. He miraculously escaped and had everybody executed. So there has been opposition to the regime, in Morocco for a long time. So even when the son came in, King Mohammed VI, in 1999, he made some cosmetic changes. You know what I mean? Here, he released some political prisoners, and you know it. But still, underneath, people want, complete reform. They want a constitutional monarchy instead of an absolute monarchy like you have there now. Corruption, bring people to book. About the king spends about $750,000 a day to maintain his residences. Okay, for such a country, think about that. Yes, a day to maintain the royal palaces and households and concubines and you name it. Now you move over to Syria, the same. Syria has been under the rule of one family since about 1971. Hafez al-Assad, the father of the current president, came to power through a coup in 71. He was there till he died in 2000. When he died in 2000, he handed over to his son, Bashar al-Assad, as president. Bashar is still in power now. There have been demonstrations in Syria, for economic and political reforms. Syria is a very repressive government. Syria is one place, I think some profound might happen. Though Assad's family has been there from 71, through a repressive political apparatus, but they are running a minority regime. In Islam, you have different sects. The Assad family comes from the Alawite sect, which is a syncretic form of Islam. The majority, of Syrians are Sunni. In fact, in 1982, a Sunni, Islamic movement, started a rebellion in the city of Hama. Over 10,000 were slaughtered, according to reports, in a few days by Assad soldiers to crush that Sunni movement. So that group is now reorganizing, again, to try and remove the government of Assad and his family. So that's a place to watch. In Bahrain, Bahrain is one that is causing the U.S. government a lot of problems now. Bahrain is the headquarters of the U.S. Fifth Fleet in the Mediterranean, and so it threatens America's interests, what happens there. The problem, or what makes Bahrain's case interesting, is Bahrain is also a minority-ruled government. The royal family, the Caliphs, are Sunnis. But the majority of Bahrain are Shiites, the same kind of Islam you have in Iran.
Right.
So it makes it very difficult, for them to retain power outside using repressive measures, because the majority, even if there's democratic vote,
they're out.
Exactly, the Shiites will still vote them out. So it's creating a whole lot of concern how the Obama government administration, balances our interest in keeping that place safe for our fleet, at the same time supporting the democratic aspirations of the majority, of the Bahraini people. It's very tricky. So right now, about 5 have been killed in the demonstrations, and 200 wounded. There are tanks on the street and all that. So that's a very tricky situation. In Kuwait, there's also demonstrations in Kuwait. Remember, Kuwait is also a repressive society, whichever way you look at it. A place where women, can't even drive and all that. So it's also very tricky because Kuwait, it's close to Iran. And so it's a very tricky
and we've
situation.
been there before.
And we've been there before, And there are some demonstrations in Iran now, like you've read in the paper, but they're trying to stop it from happening. However, Iran is different in a way from the other regimes, in the Arab world, in that there's an institutionalized theocracy, that runs the country. It's not dependent on one strong man like Mubarak or Gaddafi. They have
a group of individuals.
Exactly, you have an institution. You have the presidency, you have the Velayat al-Figi, who is the supreme leader, then the Council of Guardians and the Parliament, the Majlis, which some of these other places don't have, as an institution. So in Iran, the demonstrators will be challenging an institution. In other countries, exactly, the demonstrator will be challenging an individual who represents, the power structure. So that is very, very important. And of course, the Palestinian territories, are kind of quiet now. I don't think they have anything to demonstrate for or against. Abbas is trying to, do a good job of keeping a lead on terrorists who are now living in Gaza, under the rule of the Hamas. That's what's troubling the U.S. government too about what's happening in Egypt, because Egypt shares a border with Gaza and Hamas, and Mubarak has been very instrumental in keeping an eye, on Hamas terrorists in Gaza to keep things quiet. So if you look at the overall situation, one wonders what's our interest in that area. Now, our interest is maintenance of stability, both for economic reasons, both for political reasons. For example, the treaty between Egypt and Israel is a cornerstone, of U.S. policy, peace policy in the Middle East. If that treaty unravels, there'll be a whole lot of problems. So that's why we are worried about what comes next. That's why we are kind of skeptical about supporting other, demonstrations in those countries until we see how things turn out in Egypt. Who takes over?
We want to be on the right side of history. Exactly. That's what we're saying.
That's correct. We want to make sure we're on the right side. So we are watching how the Egyptian army conducts itself, if political prisoners are released, if genuine economic reforms are enacted, if opposition leaders are allowed to contest the election. All these things are important, and most of them haven't happened yet. So people are getting concerned. For example, there are something called Emergency Law 58, which Mubarak has used to detain people. In fact, there are over 17,000 people detained in Egypt now under that law that need to be released. I remember a few days before Mubarak, stepped down, Omar Suleiman said, well, we have to take our time before repealing that law because you have 17,000 people on the street. These are people who are detained because of exactly for protesting their rights. Yeah, not because
political prisoners.
Exactly. Anybody, if you all you need to do is say something bad about Mubarak or the government, you are arrested and detained, no trial. So that law needs to go. It has not been, repealed. So people are watching to see what the army does. And don't forget, the Egyptian army, like most Middle Eastern armies, have an economic interest in what happens in Egypt. A lot of corporations and companies are run and owned by the military establishments. And right now, the national financial institutions are saying that the Mubarak regime, or even his family, looted between $50 to $70 billion in these 30 years. Because every contract that comes into Egypt, even through the military, the family also gets some kickback. Now, Switzerland has said they've seized some assets belonging to the Mubarak family, and I'm sure other countries will do the same. Though he's still in Sharm el-Sheikh now, but all indications are that he won't be there for long. Because as far as he stays in the country, there'll still be some fear amongst them that he might come back. So they're still insisting that he leaves the country completely and goes into exile somewhere.
And so, Dr. Madu, this Egyptian revolution is still an influx in a real sense. I mean, it's sort of, there's no real indication as to where this thing might lead because the army is still sort of reluctant to deal with this, to remove this law.
That's correct.
Is that what we're saying? And that the United States has to work within that framework. And of course, Dr. Madu, we're coming to the end of this show today, and you understand what we have to do here. But I do want to thank you for that information, and that I think it does give us some idea in terms of the chaos, in a real sense, that the United States has to deal with as part of our policy there. And of course, let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.